she lives alone. To many, this is a warning sign, a flaw, a tragedy. A woman without a man must be lonely, broken, left behind. But what if they're wrong? What if solitude is not her defeat, but her initiation? What if the silence that surrounds her is not emptiness, but power? What if this woman, the one who walks alone, is not the weakest in the tribe, but the most dangerous? Carl Jung didn't live in a world of dating apps, modern feminism, or viral podcasts about high-value partners, but his work saw deeper than all of that. Jung wasn't concerned with appearances. He was concerned with archetypes, with symbols, with the soul beneath the social costume. And when you look at the woman who lives alone through a Jungian lens, a truth begins to emerge, a truth most people are not ready to hear. This woman is not lost. She is in process. She is not unworthy. She is undergoing initiation. And she is not waiting for a man to give her a story. She is writing her own mythology. Our culture teaches women to be chosen, not to choose themselves. From childhood, they are trained to wait for the prince, the ring, the rescue. Their power is placed in someone else's hands, someone who might never come, or worse, who comes and breaks them. But some women, not many, but some, reach a breaking point, a moment of disillusionment so deep that it cracks open the persona, the false identity they've been carrying like a second skin. In that moment, something shatters, but something older awakens. This is the beginning of individuation. Individuation is the process Jung described as becoming whole. It is the soul's rebellion against imitation. It is the psychological death of the mask and the slow birth of the self. And for many women, it begins when they are alone. Not when they're with the wrong man, not when they're chasing validation, but when the world goes quiet, when the noise of other people's expectations fades, when the mirrors go dark and she can no longer see herself through the eyes of others. At first, this silence is terrifying. The ego panics. The inner critic gets louder. The world tells her she's failing, as if her value was measured by how well she performs as someone's girlfriend, wife, mother. But deeper down, something else is stirring. The self doesn't measure success by roles fulfilled. The self wants truth. It doesn't care about timelines. It doesn't ask for perfection. It only wants her to look inward and stay. This is where most turn back. They run from the silence. They beg for noise again. They chase distraction, validation, drama, even pain, just to not feel the void. But a few, the rare ones, stay. They sit in the discomfort. And from here, her life begins to take a different shape. She no longer chases connection. She attracts resonance. She no longer performs femininity. She embodies it. She no longer waits for someone to save her. She walks herself home. This is not an easy path. It is not glamorous. It is not romantic. It is sacred. Because what this woman is doing is not casual solitude. She is undergoing a psychic process Carl Jung called enantiodromia, the swinging of the psyche from one extreme to its opposite, from dependence to self-sufficiency, from fear to sovereignty, from illusion to clarity. She may still ache, she may still long, she may still hope, but now she does it from a place of choice, not compulsion. Her solitude is no longer exile, it's sanctuary. And from that sanctuary, she begins to see what others miss. She sees the manipulation in media. She sees the generational trauma in her family line. She sees the shadow of codependency hiding in the costume of love. And she says, no more. No more shrinking to fit. No more waiting to be picked. No more asking for permission to be real. Because this woman has discovered something that terrifies society. A woman who doesn't need a man to feel valid, cannot be controlled. She can be loved. She can be partnered. She can be held, but not controlled. And so she becomes, quietly, dangerously, free. Not above love, but beyond illusion. Not bitter, but sharp. Not invulnerable, but whole. This is not a rejection of men. It's a return to self, and any man who meets her must meet her there, not with power, but with presence, not with conquest, but with clarity, not with a fantasy of who she could be, but with reverence for who she already is. So if you are a woman who lives alone, not because you gave up, but because something deeper called you inward, you are not failing, you are not forgotten. You are becoming. You are undergoing something ancient, powerful, and invisible to most. You are walking the path of individuation. You are not a side character in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And that is the most radical thing a woman can be. Since the beginning of civilization, women have been cast in myths that were never theirs. Tales that whisper, "You are not whole. You are the half. You are waiting to be completed. You are the prize, the possession, the one chosen, never the one who chooses."
From childhood, the messages are everywhere. In the bedtime stories, the princess sleeps, the prince awakens her. In the fairy tales, the girl is trapped and love sets her free. In the movies, she finds her worth when she is wanted. Even in modern narratives disguised as empowerment, the underlying theme persists. She is not truly fulfilled unless someone else says so. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to survive social reality. But for many women, the persona is not just a social convenience, it's a survival strategy. It's a role she's told to perform until she forgets where the mask ends and her skin begins. And one of the most polished personas, the good woman who waits. She waits to be chosen. She waits to be validated. She waits for the man who will finally give her life a story worth telling. She waits, and the world praises her for it. "You're so patient. You're so nurturing. You're such a catch." But deep beneath that smile, behind the well-rehearsed lines, there is a tremor, a fracture, a silent scream growing louder with each year she lives for someone else's gaze. Then one day, and it never looks heroic from the outside, she stops. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't throw a tantrum. She simply stops performing. She no longer wants to be seen. She wants to see. She no longer wants to be wanted. She wants to want. She no longer wants to belong. She wants to become. And that's when the storm begins, because the world does not respond kindly to a woman who removes the mask. She will be called cold, difficult, masculine, angry, unlovable. But what is really happening? She is meeting herself for the first time, without an audience. And in that encounter, something sacred takes place. The persona begins to crack. The girl who was raised to be nice begins to feel rage. Not destructive rage, sacred rage. The rage of waking up after years of being asleep in a dream someone else designed for you. She looks at the roles she's been given: the caregiver, the peacemaker, the pretty one, the obedient one, the sacrificial one, and she asks, "Who gave me these? And why did I wear them for so long?" She begins to notice how often she said yes when she wanted to say no. How many times she smiled when she wanted to cry. How many men she called love who only loved their reflection in her. She starts deleting numbers. She starts turning off her phone. She starts sitting in silence. And in that silence, a new voice emerges. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg.
And that's when the tears come. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition, of return, of remembering. This is what Jung meant by individuation. It is not an addition, it is a removal. A peeling away of all that is false so the true self can rise. But it is not easy. The woman who begins this process enters a kind of death, not of the body, but of the identity. She mourns the girl who once dreamed of being rescued. She grieves the woman who believed her value was tied to being desired. She lets go of the version of herself who smiled through the ache just to be chosen. And then she finds herself alone. Not abandoned, alone by choice. Alone with reverence. Because now she's not seeking a partner, she's seeking herself. Not the self that conforms, not the self that begs, the self that simply is. And here's the paradox. As she grows whole in her solitude, she becomes less interested in proving herself to the world. But the world becomes increasingly interested in her. People begin to notice a glow, not the glow of seduction, but of sovereignty. Men may pursue her, but she does not entertain them with games. She no longer finds flattery flattering. She sees through the scripts. She's not here to impress. She's here to express, to create, to move, to heal, to rest, to exist on her own terms. And because of that, she is powerful. Not in the way the world defines power, domination, control, applause, but in the older sense of the word. Power as presence, power as stillness, power as knowing. And when others sense this, they won't always understand. Some will be drawn to it, some will resent it, some will try to tame it. But she no longer shifts shape for anyone. She no longer reduces herself to fit the room. She no longer dimples through discomfort, because she has tasted the clarity of solitude, and she knows it is better to be alone in truth than adored in illusion. So the next time you see a woman who lives alone, don't pity her. Don't assume she was rejected. Don't project your fear of solitude onto her. Instead, ask yourself, what has she discovered in the silence that others are too afraid to face? And what kind of world would we live in if more women had the courage to remove the mask, to embrace the void, and to become whole without waiting to be chosen? That woman is not incomplete. She is the myth breaker, the lineage healer, the sovereign one. She is not living alone. She is living aligned. She's individuation, the birth of the true self. Carl Jung believed that the greatest tragedy of the human experience was not suffering, but unlived potential. The parts of us we ignore, silence, bury, don't disappear. They wait. They wait in the subconscious, in the body, in our dreams, in our relationships. And they manifest as anxiety, rage, depression, apathy, addiction. For women, this unlived potential often takes the form of disconnection from the self. Why? Because from a young age she is taught to perform, not to be. Be pretty, be agreeable, be small, be chosen, but never simply be. So she becomes a master of adaptation. She knows how to please. She knows how to sense the room. She knows how to be wanted, but not known. Until one day she forgets who she ever was before the performance began. That forgetting is the beginning of suffering, but it is also, paradoxically, the beginning of awakening, because when the false self begins to crumble, something deeper begins to stir. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the soul's journey back to wholeness. Individuation is not self-improvement. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming real. It's the reclamation of every disowned part, the rage, the desire, the intuition, the knowing. It's a spiritual homecoming. But the path is not linear. It often begins in crisis, a breakup, a loss, a burnout, a moment where the old life no longer fits. And in that collapse, there is an opening. Not a solution, not a 5-step plan, but a question. Who am I? Without the roles I've played. At first, the answer is terrifying. I don't know. And in that not knowing, the ego screams. It wants certainty. It wants to go back. It wants to rebuild the old mask. But the self is patient. It doesn't panic. It waits. It watches. It holds space for what comes next. And what comes next is the descent into the shadow, the forgotten, the rejected, the exiled. This is where she meets her rage, the rage she was told wasn't ladylike, where she meets her sensuality, the part she was taught to hide, where she meets her ambition, the fire she once dimmed to avoid rejection. And slowly, she begins to gather those parts like sacred relics, not to display them, not to use them, but to welcome them home. This is the true spiritual work. It's not about transcending the ego, it's about integrating it. It's not about escaping the world, it's about showing up more whole within it. And as this woman goes deeper into herself, something shifts. She stops asking others to complete her. She stops outsourcing. And from that place, everything changes. She chooses her friends more carefully. She dates with discernment. She says no without guilt. She says yes without fear. Because now her compass is not who likes her, it's what aligns with her. She no longer wants to be pursued. She wants to be met. Not with charm, not with promises, but with presence. Because a woman who knows herself is no longer impressed by potential. She seeks resonance. Someone who was also descended, also broken, also rebuilt, also become. And if such a person never comes, she does not wait in agony. She lives. She creates. She heals. She rests. She dances with the mystery of life. Because the self does not need permission to exist. It simply is. And this is what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your parents expected, not who society approved, not who the culture rewarded, but who you were before the world told you who to be. The woman who lives alone, but walks with her soul, is not behind, she is ahead. She is not lost, she is becoming. She is not broken, she is whole, in a way few dare to be. And her presence, even in silence, is a revolution." The shadow of the independent woman. There is a part of the independent woman that no one talks about. The part beneath the confidence, beneath the calm, beneath the clear boundaries and proud solitude. It's the part she doesn't always post about. The part that doesn't glow, it aches. It's the shadow. Carl Jung said, "The shadow is everything we refuse to see about ourselves." But sometimes, the shadow is not just what we reject, it's what we've had to hide to survive. For the woman who lives alone, who broke free from toxic dynamics, who learned to say no, who chose the long walk home to herself, the shadow doesn't always look like darkness. It looks like exhaustion, hyper-independence, isolation masked as strength. Because to become this woman, she had to build walls. She had to unlearn softness. She had to swallow disappointment. She had to become her own savior. And over time, it became easy to forget. There's still a tender one inside, the one who longs for safety, for touch, for being seen, not for her strength, but for her soul. But because she's been disappointed so many times, she learned to stop expecting others to hold her, so she holds herself, and that is beautiful and holy. But it can also become lonely. Jung warned of this danger, that when we become too identified with one part of ourselves, even the strong part, we disown the rest. And the parts we disown don't disappear. They become ghosts in the psyche, They appear in dreams, in cravings, in restlessness, in emotional numbness. The woman who is always fine might wake up one day feeling nothing at all. Not sadness, not joy, just emptiness. That is not failure. That is a message from the shadow. You've gone too long without being held. The myth of the independent woman is powerful, but if it becomes armor, it can also become a cage. Because true independence is not about never needing anyone. It's about having the strength to let someone in, without losing yourself in the process. It's about boundaries that breathe, about sovereignty that allows connection, about discernment, not defensiveness. But to reach that place, she must integrate her shadow. She must sit with the part of her that's tired of being strong, that wants to rest, that wants to be soft again. Not for someone else, not to be chosen, but because that softness is part of her wholeness. It's not a regression, it's a return. To feel deeply again. To cry when the old wounds rise, to ask for help without shame. To say, I am whole, but that doesn't mean I never need. That is not weakness, that is maturity. Because when she integrates the shadow, she becomes something rare. A woman who can stand alone, but who also knows how to receive. A woman who doesn't collapse for love, but doesn't close her heart to it either. A woman who is not afraid of her depth, but also not afraid to be held in her light. And that woman is the embodiment of power. Because her solitude is not armor, it's sanctuary. Her independence is not isolation, it's choice. Her heart is not closed, it's sacred. This is the next level of the path, not just walking alone, but learning when and with whom to walk together, and knowing even the strongest ones need softness, even the wise need rest, even the complete still get lonely. But now she doesn't shame those feelings. She listens, she honors, she integrates. Because the self is not just the light, it is the whole spectrum. And she is not here to perform wholeness. She is here to live it. Archetypal transformation. Carl Jung didn't just study the mind, he studied the myths behind the mind. He believed that within every human psyche lived archetypes, primordial patterns, ancient roles, timeless energies that shape how we see ourselves, others, and the world. And when a woman chooses solitude, not as avoidance but as initiation, she is not just making a lifestyle choice. She is undergoing an archetypal transformation. She is moving from one mythic identity into another, from the maiden to the wise woman. The maiden is innocent. She is pure, pleasing, adaptable. She defines herself by how others see her. But the wise woman, she is sovereign, she is deep. She carries a lantern of truth, even when others fear the light. This shift is not cosmetic, it's not aesthetic. It is psychic, it is existential. It's the moment she no longer asks, do they love me? And instead begins to ask, do I respect myself? From the lover to the creator. The lover seeks connection. She desires beauty, passion, presence, but she may lose herself in others, her light bending around their wants. The creator, however, she generates from within. She channels love into art, words, gardens, movements. She still feels deeply, but her worth is not dependent on being wanted. She moves from consumption to creation, from being seen to seeing herself. From the caretaker to the alchemist. The caretaker pours herself into others. She sacrifices, serves, saves. But the alchemist takes her own wounds and turns them into wisdom. She doesn't abandon compassion, she expands it to include herself. She learns to give, not from depletion, but from overflow. And this transformation is not linear. Sometimes she will feel like the maiden again, sometimes the lover, sometimes the alchemist, sometimes all at once. But now she chooses consciously. She's no longer trapped in an archetype. She's in relationship with them. She recognizes the energies rising within her, and she integrates them. That is Jungian power. It's not about being one thing. It's about becoming whole. It's about seeing that she is not too much. She is multitudes. And when she understands that, she no longer feels ashamed for evolving. She no longer apologizes for shifting, shedding, transforming. She lets go of who she was. Last year, last month, yesterday. She becomes fluent in her own becoming, and she understands something most of the world forgets. Solitude is not just absence. It's a womb. It's where archetypes dissolve and reform. Relationship as sacred choice. The woman who has walked the path of individuation does not enter relationships the way she once did. She no longer seeks validation. She no longer needs rescue. She no longer asks, "Will you choose me?" Because she has already chosen herself. Carl Jung believed that all relationships are mirrors, reflecting not only who we are, but what parts of us are still unconscious. And when a woman has spent time alone, facing her shadow, reclaiming her voice, owning her truth, she begins to relate differently. She does not seek to be completed. She seeks to be witnessed. She is not waiting for the perfect man. She is discerning for the man who can meet her, not in fantasy, but in reality, not in performance, but in presence. And this terrifies some. Because a woman like this cannot be controlled. She cannot be manipulated. She cannot be seduced with shallow words or borrowed confidence. She sees through performance. She recognizes wounded ego. She notices projection. And she doesn't judge, but she doesn't stay either. Because now relationship is not obligation, it's invitation. She asks, does this connection make me more of who I am, or less? Do I feel seen, or simply consumed? Can we speak in truth, or only in roles? She listens not just to words, but to her body, her intuition, the silence between sentences. And when something feels off, she no longer gaslights herself. She no longer trades peace for potential, because now love must be clean, not perfect, but honest, not performative, but real. This doesn't mean she's hardened. It doesn't mean she's closed. It means she knows her heart is sacred ground, and not everyone is meant to walk there. So she protects it, not with fear, but with reverence. If someone wants access, they must bring truth. They must bring depth. They must bring respect. And she will do the same. Because she is not above partnership. She just refuses to enter it unconsciously. And if no one comes, she does not shrink. She does not settle. She keeps walking, creating, loving, living. Because the point was never to be chosen. The point was to become so fully herself that love is no longer a need. It's a resonance, a meeting of two whole beings, not to complete one another, but to expand together. That is sacred relationship. And that is the only kind she's interested in now. Solitude as a creative power. There is a silence that doesn't isolate. It awakens. There is a solitude that doesn't diminish you. It reveals you. And there is a time in every woman's life when she must go into that silence, not to vanish, but to become visible to herself. Carl Jung believed that creativity was not just a gift, It was the expression of the self breaking through the cracks of the persona. And in solitude, that breakthrough finally happens. When a woman stops performing, she starts creating. Not because someone asked, not because someone is watching, but because something within her has finally been given space to speak. In the quiet, the suppressed voices rise. The buried desires return. The forgotten dreams surface. She starts writing again, singing, drawing, building, dancing. She starts trusting those ideas that seemed too strange, too much, too wild. Because now she understands that wildness is not chaos. It is truth with rhythm. Solitude becomes her muse, not because it's peaceful, but because it's honest. It does not flatter her. It does not lie. It simply holds up the mirror until she can finally see herself. And what she sees is not just a woman who lives alone. She sees an artist, a vessel, a force. Her home becomes a sanctuary. Her mornings become rituals. Her walks become meditations. Her work becomes prayer. Because now, everything she touches, she does it with presence. Everything she creates, she does it with intention. And everything she allows into her life, she filters through one sacred question. Does this resonate with who I am now? No more pleasing to belong, no more striving to prove, no more performing to be loved. She knows. Her existence is enough. Her voice is valid. Her vision is sacred. And in this solitude, she is not waiting for life to begin. She is already living it, fully, boldly, softly, wildly. And the woman who creates from this space, she does not seek attention. She becomes magnetic, because her life, as it is, radiates truth. And truth in a world of noise is the most attractive frequency there is. The new feminine myth. For centuries, the feminine myth was written by others. She was the muse, the lover, the caretaker, the innocent, the betrayed. She was shaped by religion, defined by men, marketed by capitalism, and softened by culture to remain palatable. But now something ancient is returning, not loud, not angry, but unmistakable. A quiet rebellion, a sacred rewriting, a myth not of submission, but of self-possession. The woman who lives alone without a man is not broken. She is breaking patterns. She is not lost. She is refusing directions that never led her to herself. She is not lonely. She is finally surrounded by her own truth. She is not against love. She is clearing space for real love, not the kind that completes her, but the kind that respects her completion. She is not rejecting the masculine. She is calling it to rise, not to dominate, but to meet her, eye to eye, soul to soul, because now she is no longer playing a role. She is becoming the story itself. This is not feminism as a trend. This is not independence as aesthetic. This is the return of the sovereign feminine, the one who remembers, I was never here to be chosen. I was here to choose truth over comfort, to choose depth over attention, to choose wholeness over validation, to choose self over performance. And in choosing this, she rewrites the myth not only for herself, but for every woman who still believes she has to wait to be worthy. This is not just personal, it's ancestral, it's archetypal, It's evolutionary, because when one woman dares to live alone, aligned, not abandoned, she breaks a spell. She challenges the programming. She whispers to others, "You can stop pretending now. There's another way." And that whisper spreads across continents, across bloodlines, across timelines, until one day it becomes a roar. And that roar becomes the sound of a new myth being born. Conclusion: the great integration. So now, let's return to where we began. A woman. Alone, not waiting, not hiding, not broken, but awake, anchored, whole. She has walked the path of solitude, faced her shadow, reclaimed her story, and rewritten her myth. She is not above love, but she is no longer enslaved by the illusion of it. She is not against connection, but she will not abandon herself to maintain it. She is not performing strength. She has simply integrated her depth. You've now walked through all the layers. You've seen the persona, the mask she was taught to wear. You've entered the shadow, the emotions she was never allowed to feel. You've witnessed individuation, the birth of her true self. You've felt the ache of hyper-independence and the strength behind her silence. You've explored her relationship to love, not as desperation, but as sacred choice. You've witnessed her as the archetype, as the artist, as the alchemist, and now you see her. Not as society defines her, not as romance novels fantasize her, but as she truly is, a sovereign being, unfolding, unapologetic, unfinished, and at peace with that. But this knowledge comes with a responsibility, because what you've just heard is not a story about someone else. It's a mirror, a portal, a call. Whether you are a woman or a man, this is your invitation to remove the mask, face the shadow, reclaim your story, to stop outsourcing your worth, to stop seeking permission to be whole, because the world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more truth. And the truth is that everything you thought made you too much or not enough was never a flaw. It was just a part of yourself waiting to be reclaimed. So now the choice is yours. Will you numb or will you feel? Will you perform or will you reveal? Will you wait or will you become? Because the awakening doesn't happen out there. It happens in this moment, right now, in your body, in your breath, in your silence. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing you can do in a world that wants you small is to live fully, love deeply, and stand alone, not as punishment, but as proof. That wholeness was never waiting at the end of a relationship. It was always waiting at the end of your own becoming. If this spoke to your soul, leave a comment. Say, "I choose the truth over the myth." Subscribe to Silent Authority and continue this journey into the mind, the shadow, and the soul. And if this resonated, let your like be a signal to the algorithm that real truth